In the last 12 months, some impromptu symbols grew into features of the American landscape. A flag became a mass of flags, a new one added each day. A yellow ribbon became a garland, decorating the country.
Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He'll trample the mountains where the grapes of wrath are sown.
A candle became a beacon of hope in a continuing vigil for the hostages in Iran. Today, the hope has been brightened by a message from Tehran, by a response from Washington. Today, as the vigil of the hostages lengthens to one whole year.
Glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on.
For the American hostages in Iran, it is now Monday morning. And when one more dawn comes up, they will have spent a full year in captivity. Knowing as we do that they have been kept shut off from news of the outside world, chances are they are unaware of today's developments. Some promising, some problematical, some controversial. Iran's parliament has come forward with terms for the hostages' release. President Carter says we could do business on that basis. But there are a lot of unanswered questions about how and how quickly we could legally meet those terms. And there are questions as to whether the deal is being rushed too hastily for election campaign purposes. In this broadcast, we'll see today's developments as the latest chapter in a strange and dramatic story, a chain of events on which some information has surfaced only in fragments over the months. And we'll see the impact of these events on one American household, a story told in letters from a hostage and in the words of his family.
Now we wait for the next bulletin. How long? Barry? How long is the next one?
Next which?
The next news, the next bulletin, the next whatever's coming.
It wasn't long in coming.
The Iranian parliament has voted to free the 52 American hostages.
Beautiful words.
If the United States agrees.
The elation was tinged with fear that it might not happen.
We're almost there. That's why I think I'm so afraid, is because we're so close now that if it shouldn't, for some reason there is another delay, or if for some reason the bottom falls out of this, it would be extremely difficult.
This is a CBS News special report with Dan Rather.
This is where it all started. 1 year ago, the American Embassy compound in Tehran, a 27-acre walled-in area right in the middle of the Iranian capital. This is an exact scale model of the compound that we have built from photographs in consultation with the State Department. The compound was sort of an American village. The ambassador's residence is here. Across the way, some housing for embassy staff. Back here, the tennis court. Over here, the swimming pool, a football field. Now, this building is where Iranians coming to the United States used to get their visas. This is the main gate. And here, the heart of the embassy and the focus of all the action, the chancery, where the main business of the embassy was conducted. And it was along this street that hundreds of Iranians were demonstrating as usual on the morning of November 4th, 1979. The crowds, egged on by Iran's new master, Ayatollah Khomeini, were venting their fury at the United States for letting the deposed Shah into the country 2 weeks earlier. Suddenly, during this day's march, a few broke off and scaled the gate. The action captured in this film, shot by a young Iranian with an 8mm home movie camera. Soon the gate was unlocked and the mob poured in. Some carried a sign proclaiming that they had come only to stage a sit-in. But before long, they were forcing their way into the chancery and outlying buildings. The Marine Guards donned helmets and flak jackets and loaded their weapons, but they were ordered not to fire. One official called Washington to report the situation. It was after 10 in the morning in Tehran, just after 3 a.m. when the phone rang at the State Department. Some of the Americans in this building slipped out a door and into the street and made a break for it. They were spotted by demonstrators on the roof of the building who seemed to be trying to set it afire. A number of the escapees were caught. A few managed to reach the sanctuary of the Canadian embassy. Inside the chancery, meanwhile, most of the embassy staff took refuge behind heavy security doors on the top floor. The Marine Guards retreated up 3 floors. using only tear gas to slow the Iranians. For a while up there, locked doors provided a shield, but the more militant demonstrators had captured an American security officer outside and threatened to kill him if the doors weren't opened. They opened. When the militants burst into the communications area, they interrupted the frantic destruction procedures, files being shredded, the smashing of electronic equipment and computer circuits containing secret coding equipment. They also found a small arsenal of automatic weapons, shotguns, gas masks and tear gas canisters, pistols and flak jackets. And in the midst of all that, a memento of the recent past. While some of the militants were busy occupying and ransacking the chancery, others spread out across the compound, rounding up what stray Americans they could find. A few had managed to escape. Most did not. In all, more than 60 were collected. And before the day was out, American diplomatic officials were prisoners in their offices, being interrogated across their own desks. And one of the most bizarre ordeals in diplomatic history had begun. It was an ordeal shared at first by more than 60 Americans, Marine Guards, embassy employees, junior staff people, and career Foreign Service officials like Consul General Richard Moorfield, a quiet, stocky man of 50, with a wife and family living back in San Diego, California.
November the 4th, of course, when it happened, we were confident it would be just days. And it was a gradual slide into accepting it might be a long time.
Dorothea Moorfield had been warned. Iran was a dangerous assignment.
It's just devastating. When you wake up in the morning and you're looking at just emptiness, then you have to look at yourself. And you have to really look inside and say, you know, am I going to survive this? Am I going to come through it a better person? Is our family going to be stronger? Is our love going to be stronger? Is our marriage going to be stronger? Or are we going to let it destroy us?
She determined early on that she held the answer to that question, that thrust into the role of head of the family, she could keep the fabric of the family stitched together using the ordinary events that fill all of their lives. Daughter Betsy at college, sons Dan, Bill, Ken, and Steve. From Richard, encouraging words to tell them he knew the strain was hard.
He says, I hope that things are okay in San Diego and that you are all holding up well. It must be especially hard on holidays and on special days like birthdays. Just remember, I am with you in my thoughts. You know that your love sustains me even though you are far away.
At Christmas, it fell to Kenneth to read the Christmas story his father had always shared in years past.
He hadn't stopped Christmas from coming. It came. Somehow or other, it came just the same.
Dear Kenneth,
And the Grinch with
I hope this reaches you by your birthday. Please know that if I am not home by then, I will be thinking of you. That is from a letter from hostage Richard Moorfield in Tehran to his youngest son, written in mid-January. It goes on. Mom said you did very well on the report card. What about the drama club? The letter includes similar personal messages to each of the other 4 Moorfield children. A couple of weeks later, January the 22nd. Dearest Dottie, I am in good health and good spirits. I miss you all and worry about the strain on you and the family. You know that I love you, and that is the most important thing for us right now. Some of Moorfield's fellow hostages were clearly not in good spirits during those early months. We are being kept in semi-darkened rooms. Our hands are tied day and night. I've been outside only once without a blindfold. It would be great to see the sun again. We still cannot speak to each other, which is the most unbearable restriction, given the need for human contact. There were complaints about confusion and conflicts among the guards on the treatment of the captives, and one young Marine wrote home to his father, I will gladly die for my people and the U.S. government for a good reason, but I will never die for a damned ex-Shah. And there was a taped message from a hostage to his wife, which she said sounded like his voice under stress and not his own words. It said, in the name of God, return the Shah and free the hostages. Let the world know that no tyrant can ever find safe harbor in the U.S.
Plymouth, #1 brand of high-mileage American cars. The American way to beat the pump with cars like the front-wheel drive TC3.
It's the last gas!
The front-wheel drive Horizon Miser.
Last gas!
the front-wheel drive Champ.
Last gas!
And the front-wheel drive Reliant K, America's highest mileage 6-passenger car.
This is it! This is it! Last gas!
Plymouth, #1 in mileage, the American way to beat the pump.
This is Linda Gray, Sue Ellen Ewing as Dallas rides again. This week's people talked to her, and she talked to this week's people about a lot.
But we won't know for 2 weeks who shot JR.
Not so fast. Remember when people asked its readers who done it? Thousands of people readers answered with some beautifully wacky theories, but one I'm sure is right. Plus, there's a week's worth of news about the people we're talking about. So treat yourself.
Treat your family to this week's people, where you'll find out more about yogurt, why people fear success, and what might have killed John Wayne.
The original price put on the hostages' freedom was the return of the Shah. It was a price which President Carter said the United States would not pay.
The actions of Iranian leaders and the radicals who invaded our embassy were completely unjustified. They and all others must know that the United States of America will not yield to international terrorism or to blackmail.
The president stopped all imports of Iranian oil, froze all Iranian government assets in this country, and dispatched naval forces to the mouth of the Persian Gulf. Beyond those moves, however, America's options seemed very limited. Publicly, officials ruled out a rescue attempt, saying that was just not feasible, though in fact, planning for one got underway almost immediately. Tehran became the stage for a massive continuing media event. Thousands of Iranians shouted curses at America, burned the American flag, and shook their fists before American television cameras as they crowded in front of the embassy. Dramatics which ended only when the American reporters and cameras were expelled. Some Americans vented their anger and frustration on Iranian students demonstrating in this country. Others expressed their feelings in candlelight vigils and the ringing of church bells. And the crisis settled into stalemate.
Letter from hostage Richard Moorfield to his family in San Diego. I'm doing a lot of reading and crossword puzzles. I even made one up the other day. And I found a book of excerpts from Spanish literature. All this helps pass the time, which goes slowly. I had to cut back on exercise because I got a big cramp. But I am up to 30 toe touches, 25 sit-ups, 30 knee bends, and 1,000 running in place. Another hostage wrote home, I have designed in my mind several new brick walks for the back garden, all with fascinating brick patterns, almost a mathematical exercise. Over the months, there were letters from hostages complaining about the lack of activity and their continued separation from each other, about the lack of news and the sense of being cut off from the outside world. And one man wrote, I'm sure by now we are on page 19 of the Washington Post. I know the American public. They have a short memory.
I brought bumper stickers today. I hope you all got them. These are very important also. They send a message to our own government. We will not let it be put on the back burner.
Through the years, Dottie Moorfield had been comfortable in her role as silent partner to a career diplomat. And this year, she has abandoned that role altogether.
Okay, it'll be the same deal as last time, Mrs. Moorfield. You'll just look at your TV like you're talking to Mike Tuck.
Willing for television cameras to come to her living room to keep the hostage issue before the public, to keep pressure on political leaders to bring them home. Anxious to take her message to any audience, ready to play a role she does not want.
It's certainly not my nature to speak to groups. It's something that a year ago I had never done, and I hope as soon as this is over, I will never do again.
In her speech, a recurring theme, bring them home with honor, not after giving in to humiliating demands or making public apologies. And so, there are bumper stickers all over town, and yellow ribbons to flutter in the fall breezes, billboards that seek to remind, even a sign put up by neighbors.
From the very beginning of this, I felt people could only care if they thought of 52 individuals. And it's why I talk about Dick, because I think if somebody relates to one of them and they think about them, then they have to care about them.
Little help from its friends, and got a little. In international forums such as the Security Council, the General Assembly, and the World Court, the embassy takeover and the holding of hostages were condemned as violations of international law, but such censure not only fell on deaf ears, it met with scorn.
The fate of the hostages, it depends on the actions of American government. Apparently, American government doesn't want to do anything for that. On the contrary, the American government seems to be happy because they can get that excuse to escalate the things.
I'll do without anything. I'll ride bicycles, I'll walk, whatever the hell it takes to get those people out of Iran and quit being a second-rate nation.
The frustrations of the hostage crisis, the chaos, the anxiety, the continued defiance, struck at the heart and soul of America, wounded the nation's ego, its sense of itself, and its place in the world.
The hostages have become sort of almost a national Rorschach test, where it's not important what the ink blots are, but what the people see there. They don't just see a great power's nose being tweaked. They say, this is a symbol of our new weakness and impotence around the world. There is this effort now, and Carter's saying it, Reagan's saying it, everyone's saying it really, that we have to become somewhat more assertive again.
There were occasional breaks in the gloom that settled over the affair. 2 weeks after the takeover, 13 black and women hostages were released, prompting hope that the rest might soon follow. In late January, the Canadians closed their mission in Iran and went home, taking with them 6 Americans that had been hiding ever since the takeover. It was a rare act of diplomatic chivalry and a caper worthy of James Bond. It gave Americans a badly needed lift. Meanwhile, there had been some reassuring glimpses of the captives in the U.S. Embassy. The first glimpse at Christmas time, when 3 American clergymen, handpicked by the Iranian militants, were allowed to hold services in the embassy before a television camera.
You alone are the Most High. You brought us here to this day.
There was a similar visit at Easter. Among the hostages filmed then was Consul General Richard Moorfield. Another hostage who appeared on camera was Richard Queen, a 28-year-old vice consul from a New York suburb. Queen later fell ill, his illness diagnosed as multiple sclerosis, and in July, he was released, arriving in Washington to a hero's welcome.
I really can't express words what it's like to be back to America again. I really can't say much more. I just wish that there were 52 more with me. And all I said, there are 14 out now, and there are 52 more to go.
A stream of emissaries, appointed and self-appointed, had sought to bridge the gap between Washington and Tehran, but the stalemate continued. In late February and early March, it appeared a solution might be at hand when both sides agreed to a UN commission to investigate Iranian grievances. But the deal fell apart, and the commission left Tehran without issuing its report. The same fate met another deal worked out reportedly for the government of Iran's new president, Abul Hassan Banisadr, to take custody of the hostages from the militants. But Banisadr proved not to have the clout to pull that off.
I have today ordered the following steps. First, the United States of America is breaking diplomatic relations with the government of Iran. The Secretary of State has informed the government of Iran that its embassy and consulates in the United States are to be closed immediately. All Iranian diplomatic and consular officials have been declared persona non grata and must leave this country by midnight tomorrow. Other action may become necessary if these steps do not produce the prompt release of the hostages.
Less than 3 weeks later, 6 months of careful, super-secret preparation came to a tragic, fiery end in the Iranian desert. A daringly, some said recklessly, conceived rescue mission had to be aborted because mechanical failures had disabled 3 of its 8 helicopters. As the rescue force prepared to leave, another helicopter collided with a fuel-carrying cargo plane. 8 Americans died in the explosion, and the hostages, it was claimed, were scattered across Iran to prevent further rescue attempts. The original focus of this bizarre story, the Shah of Iran, was now a dying itinerant, on the move from a New York City hospital to an Air Force base in Texas, to an island off the coast of Panama, and finally to Egypt. where cancer put an end to his life. That did not, however, put an end to the hostage crisis or to the private ordeal of the Moorfield family in San Diego.
This was the year that Dottie and Richard Moorfield were to celebrate their 25th wedding anniversary. The year that oldest child, Betsy, was graduated from college.
It was very special to me. It was very special to her. She was, of course, our first one to graduate. It is a time that Richard had planned to come home. It was, for various reasons, it was very special, and there's no way in the world he would have missed it had he been able to be there.
This was the year Dan turned 21.
I didn't think it'd be hard, but the next week was very hard. It was just a very emotional time for me. The fact that I couldn't share that with my father. I couldn't. There wasn't a celebration. It was just another day.
The kids, I've been so concerned that they've had to mature before they should have had to. They've gotten so grown up in so many ways. They'll never really be the same. They'll never be carefree teenagers. They realize their vulnerability.
Okay, let me do 8 first.
It didn't seem to matter if we missed school while it was going on because we were so sure that it would only last a couple days or maybe a week, you know, maybe, and then it got on to a month, and if we had decided just to stop our lives until it was all over, here we're coming to a year. It would have meant a whole year out of our life.
I think I guess it changed me in a way. I'm much more aware of what's going on, of the current events, and it's made me realize much more what different people are like.
And the children have seen their mother grow and change over this year as well.
She is really leading the family now, which before, she's always had a major part in our family, but now she really is the head as far as we're concerned, and this sort of leadership is really, I think, how she's most changed.
It doesn't surprise me that she's come out a strong person, because I knew she would, but it surprises me how she gets everything done and still manages to be mother besides.
Write it down, okay? Yeah. So I won't schedule anything else. Dick doesn't want to come home and find, you know, his wife and kids' vegetables in a corner. Then he'd feel guilty about that. He wants us to survive it. I don't think I have an option. I think you either grow from it or you start to disintegrate. Either you fight or you don't.
It's not American power nor world opinion that has finally begun to budge the hostage stalemate, but war, an extraneous war. It took an Iraqi invasion of Iran's oil provinces to change the atmosphere in Tehran. The country is still shut off to Americans, but reporters who covered the hostage crisis can monitor the new situation by television and can still reach news sources in that chaotic capital by telephone.
Tehran is a long way, 420 miles from the front line. But there are occasional reminders like this Iraqi air raid on the capital that the country is at war and the Khomeini regime is fighting for its life. Automobile traffic has declined dramatically on Telegani Street, adjacent to the American embassy, where Iranians once honked their horns as a gesture of support to the militants inside. Gasoline is now rationed, and owners of private cars are allowed only 6 gallons a month. Kerosene, used by many Iranian families for cooking and heating, is also in short supply, and some families are moving in with relatives to conserve their weekly ration. Iranian doctors say some drugs are no longer available, and what is on hand must be shared with the military for treating casualties. Around the embassy compound, an elaborate mural now covers the walls. It vividly tells the story from the militants' point of view of the embassy seizure and the uncovering of alleged spy activity. But the hostage issue has become secondary. The war with Iraq is Iran's priority now. During the ups and downs of this past week's debate in the Majlis, the Iranian parliament, a consensus emerged that the war had made the release of the hostages a necessity for Iran.
This morning's debate in the Majlis produced the first clear break in the crisis. official approval of a hostage release if the United States met Ayatollah Khomeini's terms, pledge not to interfere in Iran's affairs, return the Shah's wealth to Iran, unfreeze Iranian assets and remove other economic blocs, cancel any claims by American citizens or companies against Iran. Those terms have some possible sticking points, but they were encouraging enough to bring President Carter home from the campaign circuit for a series of special meetings.
Ever since the American hostages were illegally seized in Iran, I have affirmed that our policy is based on two fundamental objectives: protecting the honor and the vital interest of the United States and working to ensure the earliest possible safe release of the hostages. As we understand the Parliament's proposals, they appear to offer a positive basis for achieving both of these objectives. We are pursuing the matter through diplomatic channels. Let me conclude with a final comment. We are within 2 days of an important national election. Let me assure you that my decisions on this crucial matter will not be affected by the calendar.
Although both presidential candidates disavow using the hostage issue for political gain, this close to the election, the imminent change in their status cannot help but have an effect. The problem is that neither candidate can be sure which way it cuts. Administration sources fear it may be days or even weeks before the complex legal problems of Iran's frozen assets are settled. And one gloomy official said tonight that if the Parliament's conditions are as difficult as they sound on first translation, no deal may be possible. However, in spite of all these difficulties, today's developments were enough to stir cautious hopes, even here in the restrained environs of the State Department.
When we videotaped these scenes just a couple of days ago, no one here would even use the word release.
The problem is that unconfirmed rumors aren't helping anyone.
But since the early hours of this morning, this group of State Department specialists has been on the telephone to diplomatic intermediaries, to foreign and U.S. news organizations. They have been scrabbling for information, for details that might clarify the terms on which Iran's parliament had announced it would free the hostages. This is the staff called the Iran Working Group. Since the embassy takeover, their one cramped room on the 7th floor of the State Department has been a principal source of our news about the captive Americans. It has been manned round the clock by Iran experts who, after a year of frustrations and dashed expectations, have learned to be skeptical about any news that seems to be good news. Even now they are reacting cautiously, but today, after hours spent checking out reports of the action taken by Iran's parliament, they took the next step. They began phoning the families of the hostages with word of the new developments.
The most recent letter from Richard Moorfield to his family, the only one they have received since the aborted rescue mission, was dated August the 4th. Dearest Dottie, last week was difficult with our 25th anniversary and your birthday, but I got through it recalling all the good times we had in San Francisco. That was where the Moorfields spent their honeymoon. I know that this is more difficult for you and the family, but we must hold on until it is over, no matter how long it takes. Tell everyone I am okay and I'm thinking of you all. You know how much I love you. Richard.
My guesses would be, you know, we'll come home, there'll be people, the phone will be ringing. I also am quite sure I won't cook. So my guess is we really will end up at sending out for pizza that first night or you know, something as simple as possible. I can't visualize it. I have trouble past getting in the front door. That sort of, I think that's where my fantasies end, where the dreams stop, that, you know, he's home.
Tonight, Mrs. Moorfield's dreams are still just that. But even with all the caution learned from this year of maddening anxiety, even with that, it's hard to keep from believing that the dreams are just a little closer to reality. I'm Dan Rather. Good night.
This has been a CBS News special report.
Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He'll trample down the vineyards where the grapes of wrath are sown. He has loosed his faithful lightning of his terrible sword. His truth is marching on.
marching on. I've seen him in the watchfire of 100 circling camps. They have builded him an altar in the evening news and dance. I can read his righteous sentence by the dim and flaring lamps. Israel is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah.
This is CBS.
But look at the